The world's weather is getting wilder.
You know, the Earth is a very violent place. There are all kinds of natural processes happening all the time.
From terrifying tornadoes
People are going to die today.
to monster hurricanes.
Nature's a beast. It'll come at you any way and every way it can.
It was mind-blowing. It was unbelievable.
And record-breaking waves.
It was just like, bang, the shock all the way up my back. And then I had the washing machine effect.
To fast-moving walls of ice.
It's like a big snowball coming at you.
As the world warms, we hear the first-hand accounts of people living through new extremes of weather.
The fire in front of me joined the fire behind me. I couldn't breathe.
Oh my God, Starbucks just got blown over.
We had passed the point of no return.
And we reveal exclusive footage captured by people around the world.
Call 911!
So, shelter from the storm and hunker down for the world's wildest weather. Coming up on World's Wildest Weather, a mission of mercy in a life-threatening situation.
All I remember is beelining it towards that animal, grabbing it, and getting it in the car.
A super cyclone brings a trail of terror to Taiwan.
After the doors blew apart, there was nothing stopping the typhoon from entering the building. It was just nuts.
But first, a blazing inferno
This was a fiery beast that was taking out our entire town.
triggers deadly mudslides.
Oh my God! You're in the middle of this perfect storm of mud. You really have to focus on surviving.
The flash flood's right there!
2017, Southern California. This is an area famous for its palm trees, stunning beaches, and beautiful forested canyons. The most southwesterly region of the United States has a warm, dry climate that has attracted tourists and residents for generations. But hidden in those green hillsides are the seeds of a cataclysmic natural disaster. After historically low levels of rainfall, California's forests are as dry as a bone.
We have been in a drought for 5, 6, 7 years. There was so much fuel in those hills. Just one spark and it becomes unstoppable.
Towards the end of 2017, the problem is made worse by a series of high-pressure weather systems parking over Southern California.
Generally, that's going to suppress precipitation and storm development, and it was happening over and over again. There had been almost no rain. There was no rain recorded in October, only a very small amount of rain in sparse parts of Southern California in the month of November, and then in December, none.
The fire services are particularly concerned about the coastal regions just to the north of Los Angeles.
Control info 2 on scene.
The unusual alignment of the hills in this region makes it even drier.
Mountain range, as you see behind me, doesn't run north to south. It runs east to west. So that means the sun is constantly baking that mountainside throughout the day, which is drying out those fuels, which helps those forest fires grow much bigger and much faster.
So the emergency services spend a lot of time trying to mitigate fire risk in places like Ventura, about 60 miles up the coast from Los Angeles.
It was really kind of a disaster waiting to happen. So the firemen were coming by and clearing ways. I'm more optimistic, and I said, you know, we're gonna be fine. There's not gonna be a fire here.
But unfortunately for Judy, by the beginning of December, the final deadly ingredient is in place to set the tinderbox alight. The arrival of the strong, dry Santa Ana winds. These build up over the inland desert regions, pass over the mountains to the west of California, then surge down through the canyons at high speed.
The Santa Ana winds at this event were strong. We were talking about winds not just for one day, but for several consecutive days. As they were coming down slope, they're warming, it's dry, and they're accelerating.
At 6:26 p.m. on the 4th of December, a fire is reported in Ventura County. The fire, named Thomas after the school near which it started, races towards the coast, driven by the high winds.
The three deadly recipes to get wildfire is the high heat, the low humidity, and the high winds. That's what's going to cause these explosive fire behavior, and that's what we had when the Thomas fire began.
About 20 miles away in Ventura, Judy has no idea of the growing threat.
I picked my children up at 6 o'clock. We went home, normal routine, had some dinner.
We were sitting in the living room.
I was gaming, actually.
She was gaming. I was sitting in the living room talking to my mom, and like the whole city and all the power just like went black.
I got so mad because I was in the middle of a game. So I run downstairs, I'm like, Mom, what did you do to the internet? Like, what happened? Everything shut off.
Ventura has lost its electricity, but will lose far more before the day is out.
We all began texting, and someone said, yeah, I believe the power's out because of a fire. So I went outside, and I saw at the top of my hill a tremendous white plume of smoke.
The bad news travels fast to Marco Farrell, just up the coast in Montecito.
I happened to be on Facebook within 5 or 10 minutes of the ignition of the Thomas fire. With that level of humidity and that amount of wind, I knew that this was going to be a monster.
And Judy and her family are right in the path of this deadly beast.
I looked at the white cloud, and it was getting thicker and bigger. Then there was a red haze behind the white smoke, so it was very clear that it was happening very fast.
The biggest fire in California's history is racing through the parched forests of Ventura County and closing in fast on hundreds of thousands of people who live in the cities on the Pacific coastline. The world's wildest weather is often captured on camera by professional storm chasers. It's only thanks to the daring of people like this that we get to see such incredible footage of these epic weather systems. People like storm chaser James Reynolds.
It's my job to travel around the world and film the biggest and strongest storms as they're making landfall.
And Josh Morgerman.
You know, people are always asking me, like, God, like, why do you do this? And, you know, honestly, sometimes I don't even know why. But there's something that just compels me to do it. It's like that moment of being in the most ferocious part of the storm. It's so awe-inspiring.
Often these danger seekers will find themselves stalking the same territory. And one of their most fertile hunting grounds is the Northwest Pacific, the area with some of the most extreme weather on the planet.
The part of the world where I do the majority of my work is the Asia-Pacific region. And that's because this area is home to the world's largest and most powerful storms, and this is where they take place more often than anywhere else on the planet.
About a third of the world's cyclones, or typhoons as they are known in this region, form in the North Pacific Ocean.
It's wide open waters in most cases, so you're going to see storms that are cyclones that form in the Pacific that are going to have the time and the distance and the energy to get bigger, stronger, and more intense.
So, when the storm clouds gather over the Pacific Ocean in July 2016, the chasers are on red alert. Typhoon Nepartak forms on July the 6th and tracks west.
This storm system is strengthening. It is intensifying. It is tapping into very warm surface waters that are 80 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer.
The storm continues to intensify as it powers towards Taiwan, an island about 100 miles off the coast of mainland China, with a population of over 20 million.
Taiwan is in a part of the Pacific that gets typhoons all the time. I mean, they're ground zero.
James Reynolds knows something big is coming. He heads out to face the cyclone.
So I flew into Taiwan about 36 hours before Nepartak was due to make landfall. The wind was picking up right on the coast, and the storm was kicking up huge waves which were crashing ashore. There was one area which has got a very famous historic bridge, and the waves were just crashing in and the current was swirling. It was beautiful to see, but it was also a clear sign that the real mayhem wasn't far off at all.
Out at sea, Nepartak has become a Category 5 equivalent super typhoon, the most intense classification, and develops a small, well-defined eye known as a pinhole eye.
What the pinhole means is that it's a tiny eye relative to the rest of the storm, and the smaller that most intense part of the storm is, a greater pressure gradient as you're moving away from the center of the storm. Smaller eye, faster winds.
So this storm was an absolute beast, and it was barreling straight towards Taiwan.
Super Typhoon Nepartak, with winds in excess of 150 miles an hour, is less than 100 miles from Taiwan. The impact when it makes landfall will be devastating. It's the evening of December the 4th, 2017. The biggest fire in California's history is racing at horrifying speed across parched forests towards the coastal communities. 20 miles away in Ventura, nearly 1 million people lie directly in the path of this turbocharged inferno.
I went outside and I saw this bellowing white gray smoke coming up with this mushroom top. The moment I saw that orange-red hue coming behind the white cloud, I knew we needed to go.
Judy rushes indoors to warn her kids.
She sees flames just coming over the hill, and she's like, it moved that fast. So she says, okay, go grab your things. You have 5 minutes.
So my mind was kind of going like a million miles per minute, just going through like all my stuff, like no, 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 yep, no. And I just kind of ran outside and put my stuff in the car, and I looked up, and I almost had to look up like straight up to see like the wall of orange, and I'm like, oh my God.
The fire is growing by about an acre every second, driven through the dry woods by the powerful Santa Ana winds. It is now blazing through the outskirts of Ventura.
The night of Thomas Fire began, the winds were very considerable. And that's what helped push that fire along so quickly and made such a big destructive path in its wake.
When you have winds moving at 70, 80 miles per hour, that's enough to not just fan the existing flame, but potentially spark new fires out ahead. It's called fire jumping.
Fire jumping is where burning embers are blown forwards by high winds, igniting new fires downwind in new areas of woodland.
You're usually seeing pop, 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 a bunch of different fires starting because the wind is transporting in those embers.
By now, the sparks are skipping from house to house, carrying the flames through the city at a terrifying rate.
The fire was literally coming over the hill, and then it was starting to go down the hill into our neighborhood.
And I suddenly realized everyone in this neighborhood is asleep. And then I proceeded to go on home to home to home and started waking people up.
We actually started driving up and down the street. We were honking our horns, we were screaming, we were yelling, everyone like, get out, get out, get out.
My biggest concern was that the fire was going to come around and barricade us in. So I finally said, yeah, we need to go.
Having done what they can to warn their neighbors, the family make their escape.
And so we drove down the hill, and just as we were at the end of our street and turning onto the major thoroughway, a large fire truck came roaring through, and he had sirens, horns, and they were announcing the evacuation.
Judy and the kids pull over a safe distance away to see the impact this fire, with temperatures reaching 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit, is having on their community.
We look up and we see this giant just flame across the entire hillside, and it looked like lava just over everything. And already the fire had moved another 10 miles.
It was an amazing sight, minus all the fear and hey, that's my house.
The blazing inferno has raged through Ventura, destroying more than 500 homes in the city. But it's not over yet. The residents of Montecito, less than 30 miles away, are advised to evacuate their homes as the fire bears down on them.
My parents went to my sister's house downtown in Santa Barbara. I stayed behind and was one of very, very few residents who stayed.
I'm here, I've got a bunch of water around the house, and I'm just standing vigilant.
I was there to try to put out any embers that came ahead of the fire.
Knock on wood, I haven't seen any live embers.
When you stay behind in an evacuation area, it is quite an eerie experience. Almost all of your neighbors are gone. There's no noise. At night, it's always much spookier.
You see, now this is getting active again.
It's very challenging to tell just how far the fire is. It looks a lot closer.
But some of those flames are hundreds of feet high.
The glow just radiates so far.
The Thomas Fire has grown from 4,000 acres to 11,000 acres in a matter of hours. And just downwind, all Marco Farrell can do is wait anxiously as the flames move relentlessly towards him and his home. July 7th, 2016. Taiwan is preparing for an incoming cyclone, one of nature's most destructive weather systems. Super Typhoon Nepartak, with wind speeds in excess of 150 miles per hour, has the island and its population of more than 20 million people directly in its line of fire.
So this storm was just barreling towards the coast really, really fast. Taiwan is very mountainous, so the storms do have a trend to weaken as they approach. But because Nepartak was moving fast, there wasn't enough time for the mountains to really scramble the storm. So holy heck, did it pack a punch when it made landfall.
Nepartak hits Taiwan just before 6 in the morning as a Category 4 typhoon.
I was in a very big, tall, high-rise hotel. And once the typhoon started to hit, the wind was blowing so hard that the whole tower was swaying. Guests were coming downstairs into the lobby because they were freaked out. And these are people who've been through a lot of typhoons, but not one like this one.
Storm chaser James is outside filming in Taidong City.
Soon it became pretty clear that where I was not going to be a safe place once the real core extreme eyewall winds pushed into the city. It's not like they blow steadily in one direction. You get these crazy swirls and eddies, which can bring in debris at kind of angles which you're not expecting.
Outside, the wind was just roaring. All you could see was white, just like the rain and the wind blowing by. You could hear the whistling.
As the winds approach 127 miles per hour, James ducks into the entrance of an apartment block.
Once the debris started flying and the cars were rocking around, it was clear to me that I needed to actually get myself indoors.
Fellow chaser Josh's nearby hotel is taking a beating.
There are these crazy air pressure fluctuations that you get inside the cores of violent typhoons.
Ears are popping like crazy.
And then all of a sudden, there's a loud crashing sound, and it got very drafty in the building, and that's a bad sign. It means some part of the building got destroyed, and now the typhoon is coming in.
This building's just blowing open. Holy crap!
Thick plate glass windows had just been smashed to pieces. You could see just debris flying down the street at incredible speeds, just furniture getting thrown around. I mean, the hotel was just getting trashed.
Just streets away, James has found shelter inside an apartment block with its caretaker.
The caretaker tried to secure the doors, the main entrance to the apartment complex, with a piece of rope, and it was just no match for the powerful winds of the typhoon. Being near those doors was a really dangerous place to be, so I was just trying to get him the hell away from those doors as quickly as possible. I was trying to shout at him in my kind of average Chinese to just get out of there, get back to safety. It's just not worth it. After the doors smashed and blew apart, there was nothing stopping the typhoon from entering the building. It was just nuts. We fled to the stairwell of the building, just surrounded ourselves with concrete on all sides.
Eye wall of the storm is coming into the building now, and lots of debris.
So even the lobby of the apartment block I was in proved to be a dangerous place. The doors smashing open, glass flying everywhere, roofing panels flying off and crashing down.
Holy cow!
This was a absolutely full-on, full-bore super typhoon coming right on top of me. Doesn't matter how well prepared you are and how much you're expecting the worst, unexpected things can happen. So it was just a case of hiding in a stairwell and waiting for the worst of it to subside.
By daylight, the eye wall of the cyclone has moved on.
Once the winds died down sufficiently, I ventured back into the lobby and peered outside. It was just starting to get light at dawn, and it looked like a bomb had gone off.
It's like an absolute war zone out there. This town's been beaten up really badly.
And the other storm chaser, Josh, is able to see the scale of the damage to the hotel he is sheltered in.
Even after being in so many storms, this one really stood out to me for just its ferocious edge. It was something else.
It was shocking to see, but what really struck me the most was just all those cars tossed around like toys, just picked up and dumped onto their roofs. It was absolutely mind-blowing to see, incredible.
Typhoon Nepartak killed 3 people and injured more than 300 as it swept across Taiwan. Southern California, December 2017. Over the course of a week, the Thomas Fire has become the biggest conflagration in the history of the state. Firefighters are shipped in from all over the country to try to contain the outbreak.
We had 8,000 personnel that were assigned to this fire, which was the largest amount of personnel assigned to a fire at that time. We had firefighters from as far away as Alaska, Florida, Maine. We had firefighters from out of the country that came and assisted us.
But despite their efforts, the fire continues to surge remorselessly through the dried-out forests of California.
Even though we threw everything we had at this fire, it had a mind of its own, and it slowly crept across our foothills.
Montecito resident Marco Farrell has stayed in his home despite the approach of the fire. Early on the morning of December the 16th, it reaches the edge of town.
I got a text message from my firefighter friend, and he said, "The fire dragon has awoken. It's coming to ravage our town. Be safe." Just chilling, absolutely chilling text to get.
But 2 things come together to save Marco and most of Montecito. Firstly, the wind changes course and eases off.
It's an east wind, which is a very unusual wind direction. Went that direction for most of the day and then backed off.
And more importantly, hundreds of firefighters pile into the area to help save the exposed homes.
We had over 300 fire engines, and it was fierce hand-to-hand combat with this fire in just critical, horrible, horrendous conditions. So a couple of minor miracles that really saved our town from the fire.
Montecito has been spared the worst impact of Thomas, but nearby Ventura has not fared so well. Judy Shannon fled her home in the city with her children and whatever possessions they could load into their car as the fire approached. Now, they head back to their old neighborhood to discover the scale of the damage.
As we started driving up the street, you'd have one home is still intact, and then one home was wiped out by the fire. Certain homes were spared, and certain homes were gone. As we approached the house, I kind of couldn't believe what I saw. This place that held us and loved us was reduced just to ash.
It's pretty just crazy. Like, just knowing that I used to live here and that now everything's like gone.
It was really weird to see like my house is just a lot with rubble. And it was just weird to kind of piece things together like, oh, that was over there. It looked totally different.
Over here is my room. Upstairs, it was like right there, there. My desk would have been about right there, but like obviously up. It was like my safe spot was my room, so it was really hard to let go of that.
By the end of December, the emergency services have managed to contain the worst excesses of the Thomas fire. Over in Montecito, Marco and his family are lucky enough to spend the holiday season in their home, which has survived the fire.
My parents came back and we did our best to enjoy Christmas and New Year's and it was really a good time. Having said that, there was a new problem in the hills. The fire was gone, but what it left was even worse.
After one of the longest droughts on record, California has experienced the biggest wildfire in its history. But now, unprecedented levels of rainfall are on the way, with disastrous consequences. The US state of Montana is nicknamed Big Sky Country. Wild weather enthusiasts Brendan Lawrence and Matt Hanvold have been studying that sky through rain and shine for more than a decade. Tucked away in the northwest of the United States, Montana is a place of climatic extremes, so there is plenty going on there for them to keep an eye on.
Montana's weather is very dynamic. Every season packs a punch.
People say here that, yeah, if you don't like the current weather, just wait 5 minutes. The world record for 24-hour temperature change happened in Montana, went from about 50 above to 50 below over the course of a day.
But the thing that really gets the boys' blood pumping is the sight of the dramatic thunderstorms which sweep across the landscape in the spring and early summer.
Well, there's nothing quite like seeing a severe thunderstorm in eastern Montana. They're so huge, you can't get the whole thing in your viewfinder.
Matt and Brendan set out on June the 21st, 2015. With high hopes of spotting some serious storm activity over the prairie lands of the Northwest, but they have no idea of quite what this day will hold for them.
We're traveling down Highway 12. It kind of winds through some hills. And it was about several miles south of the storm, and it was heading east.
We ended up in Fallon County because the storm began to move south.
We stop there, set up, start filming the storm coming in, and it's just approaching us. And it had rapidly intensified and grown.
As we were waiting for the storm, we actually had a very close lightning strike. And it was the Hollywood soundtrack of thunder roar. What is with that moving so quick?
As the storm hammers towards them, the sky becomes increasingly green.
It's very common that before severe weather that the light will be almost a greenish tint, and that means that you have a very deep water column in the sky, and if you have a lot of moisture in the sky, that means, well, you're either going to get very, very heavy rain or a lot of big hail.
Seasoned weather watchers Brendan and Matt are about to witness one of the most intense hailstorms they have ever seen.
Oh my God!
But this time, it's more than just a severe storm. This time, it's a matter of life and death. The Thomas Fire, which burnt across California in December 2017, razed over 400 square miles of land, much of it in the steep-sloped canyons north of Los Angeles. By early January 2018, the landscape has been transformed.
The hills were unrecognizable. This is just incredible. This is my first real view of the mountains. They are just naked. It was like the moon. So you saw huge bands of our sandstone, and then above and below them, just the mountain of mud and dirt and ash.
This creates serious concerns about the safety of the people living at the bottom of these barren and precarious slopes.
You have a fire. Depending upon the severity, the vegetation burns, okay? Usually you're left with a little bit of some kind of vegetation to take root. As you can see over my shoulder behind me, that didn't happen here. The fire burnt all the way to the mineral soil, which became problematic as the rains came.
And the plant life in the region makes the problem even worse.
The primary vegetation in that area is something called chaparral, but it's shrubby, it's trees, it's what you would expect in sort of a Mediterranean climate, which Southern California has. So when that vegetation burns, it's going to release a waxy substance, and that means that the whole top layer of soil is now unstable. So it's waxy, it's unstable, and it's ready to move.
The wax coats the soil and ash left behind, so that rain that would usually be absorbed bounces off and runs down the slope, picking up debris along the way.
As I drove around looking at this Martian landscape that was so foreign to me, I just knew something was going to happen.
The only thing needed to tip the balance on the millions of tons of mud and rock above thousands of Californian homes is water. The much longed-for rain is now a feared enemy, and the wet season is just starting.
Forecasting weather on the West Coast is pretty much witchcraft, but we knew that the rain event was going to come.
Early in January, a cold front settles over Southern California, carrying with it the threat of major storm activity. The people of Montecito, at the foothills of the Santa Ynez Mountains, attempt to protect their properties with sandbags, but the approaching weather system threatens rain on an unprecedented scale.
As the storm approached, I sent one last message out on Facebook, and it read at 12:20 on January 9th, "The fire dragon has left us with barren hills above, and now his cousin, the water dragon, is here to menace us." And that was just 3.5 hours before the mountain came down on us.
On January the 9th, the deluge hits Southern California.
At the one point, it rained about 1/2 inch in 5 minutes, covering a large area behind me. That's a lot of water that's got to go somewhere.
Marco and his parents are at their home in Montecito in the early hours of the morning.
As the rainfall increased, it actually woke me up. I went outside to try to look up the street to see what was going on. And it's huge debris flow was coming down the street.
Flash floods right there! Oh my God, Mom! Close the door!
Marco runs for his life.
I ran inside and slammed the kitchen door behind me and started yelling at my mom, "You gotta wake up, Dad, wake up, Dad, wake up, Dad."
Wake Dad up!
Then Marco makes a decision which may well have saved his and his family's lives. He opens the back door.
The mud hit the house, and then all of a sudden the kitchen door was violently flung open. There was so much violence in the mud flashing through the house with such speed, you couldn't stop it. There's a tsunami of mud.
We literally have a torrent of mud going through the house.
Fortunately, the mud has an exit point. It pours through the house to the open back door.
And it opens inward, so had the mud come in, I would not have been able to open it against the force of the mud. The pressure would have built up higher and higher and higher until we would have been sucked out.
But even though there is an outlet, the torrent continues.
God, I pray for everyone here.
The levels continue to rise.
As high as the kitchen counters.
And the structure of the house is under enormous pressure.
Everyone stay calm.
As the mudslide crashes past in the street outside.
It was terrifying. You could feel the house move with these just repeated hit after hit after hit.
It's pushing against the door. I don't want more to come in.
I was waiting to hear that the house was starting to fail. I mean, that was what I was trying to listen for.
And we were taking them over here to the lawn where they were being...
The emergency services scramble to help, but in the dark of the night, struggle to see what it is they are trying to deal with.
We got to the area, and all you could really see was what our headlights and our flashlights were showing us. We didn't know the scope of this incident.
While Marco is trapped with his aging parents in his mud-battered home for nearly 2 hours, waiting for the flow to subside.
As you're in the middle of this storm, this perfect storm of mud and debris, your mind goes to a million places, but you really have to focus on surviving.
As the emergency services get to grips with the problem.
Well, the first couple hours of the event, we were trying as best we can to get as many people in there to rescue as many folks as we could. You had to look in every debris pile in every house that reached the ceiling in some places. Other places, the houses were completely destroyed. There were some miracles in this event.
After the mudslide has passed, Marco and his parents head out of their devastated home and flag down a passing fire truck.
That's where we began the long journey out of the mud. The line between survival and death was a very razor-thin line. We escaped with our lives and the clothes we were wearing. And our family feels so incredibly lucky. It wouldn't have taken much more for our house to fail.
More than 100 homes were destroyed by the mudslides. There were 21 deaths, in addition to the 2 fatalities from the earlier Thomas fires. These events caused over $2 billion worth of damage. June the 21st, 2015. Matt Hanvold and Brendan Lawrence are out filming extreme weather on the open plains of Montana. They have parked right in the path of a major storm system. After a few minutes, a violent hailstorm starts to pound their vehicle.
Oh, there's hail. We got hail. It hailed for quite a while, for several minutes, and progressively became larger.
The hail was, about 2 inches in diameter. The bigger stones right on golf ball, maybe tennis balls for the very biggest stones.
Montana is prone to heavy hail, partly because of the topography of the state.
We do get a lot of hailstorms. Sometimes just the wind blowing across the surface of the earth itself will hit the hills we have here in Montana. It'll produce what's commonly called an orographic lift.
Orographic lift is what happens when a wind flow reaches a mountain range and rises through the atmosphere. As it rises, it tends to cool. The colder air can hold less moisture, so it loses it as precipitation. Usually that will fall as rain, but with a strong updraft, which means air rising up from the ground into the storm, you can get hail.
Hail is actually formed when a mature thunderstorm has a strong enough updraft.
The updraft basically freezes a raindrop, and every time that raindrop starts to fall to the earth, the updraft catches it again and puts another ring on it as it freezes again.
And this can happen dozens of times until you start getting stones from the size of peas to marbles, up to golf balls and even baseballs and softballs, until they finally just get so big and heavy that the wind's not blowing hard enough to keep them suspended any longer.
On June the 21st, the hailstones are big, but then another hazard kicks in. The wind starts to rise.
What really caught us off guard with this storm was the wind that came with it.
Oh, here comes the wind.
It just was blowing 30, 40 miles an hour, then it was 50, then it was 60, then 70 and 80, and we'd guess at least 90 miles per hour on the peak gusts.
So I was filming out the side window, and you can see these hailstones. At first they're hitting and they're bouncing, and then they're not bouncing anymore. They're just coming in at such an angle, they're just glancing off the ground and flying into the field.
We got bad wind here.
It kept getting more and more intense.
But as it grown significantly enough to become a threat to lives and property.
And the property at risk here is their vehicle, and more specifically, its windows.
The first break on the windshield happened in the bottom center, and one of them hit there and it put a little arc line through the glass.
Oh crap, we're losing it.
One of them hit up in the upper corner and kind of fractured the whole area.
Oh crap, there goes forward. Oh god, oh god.
As the wind was blowing harder and harder, it just began smashing the entire thing in on us.
Oh, no, no!
Then they spot something out there in the hail.
I remember Brendan at the peak of the storm saying, "There's something on the road in front of us." I turned my camera and we see this antelope.
And it was kind of stumbling and falling, and it made its way off the road. And it was trying to find some sagebrush to hide behind.
And I immediately think, can we do anything to help this animal?
Oh
no. Matt can't abandon the ailing antelope.
All I remember is beelining it towards that animal, grabbing it and getting it in the car.
He is battered by hailstones the size of golf balls as he launches his mission of mercy.
And it didn't fight him or struggle or anything. He picks it right up and walks back to the car with it and sits down in the seat next to me. The little antelope's looking at me.
It was kind of a mutual understanding that, hey, we're both trying to get out of this, so let's do it together.
Holy cow.
It's almost overwhelming in a sense, sitting here and saying, is this real life? Am I really holding this wild animal, and is it really letting me? And you know, all that was racing through my head as the hail continued to fall.
The shattered windscreen holds out to protect the three of them until finally the storm eases off and the antelope jerks into life.
I think the hail's over.
Okay. Well, try to get me, I'll let it go here.
Oh.
I put it down and he just went on his merry way.
It just kind of trots off into the bushes, off out into the prairie. It was pretty neat that we rescued this little animal. It was definitely kind of a good feeling.
Their windscreen has been destroyed, but at least the antelope lives on to fight another day.